Good morning. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda. Before we proceed, though, I would like to just ask if everyone can please make sure, turn on your microphones and please speak loudly. We were having some sound issues earlier this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And if you continue to notice those sound issues, please let us know and we'll adjust accordingly. Okay. First, I'd like to conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are with us today. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Present.
Commissioner James Alessi. Would you be so kind as to speak a little louder and closer to the mic?
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Tracy Edwards.
I am here.
Thank you. Commissioner John Howard.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Dave Oleski.
Here, and good morning.
Good morning. And Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Thank you. We'll move to the regular agenda. Our first item for discussion, item 201, case 22-M-0645, related to the investigation into Central Hudson Gas and Electric Corporation's customer information and billing system. Presented today by John Sipos, our Deputy General Counsel, and Dave Rossi, Deputy Director of the Office of Investigation and Enforcement. Eric Ryder and Debbie Edens are here and available for questions as well. Please begin, Mr. Sipos.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. Item 201 is a proposed order for your consideration directing Central Hudson Gas and Electric Corporation to show cause why the Commission should not commence a prudence proceeding and/or a civil penalty action and/or an administrative enforcement and penalty action pursuant to Public Service Law Sections 25 and 25A for apparent violations of the Public Service Law, rules, and regulations adopted thereto, and Commission orders. The proposed order to show cause references and is based upon a report prepared by the Office of Investigations and Enforcement. And by way of background, on September 1, 2021, Central Hudson deployed a new customer information and billing system. In the months following that implementation, Central Hudson customers complained to local officials and to the New York State Department of Public Service about excessive and delayed bills and a lack of customer support by the company. Complaints continued and increased in the late fall and into the winter. On April 5, 2022, the Office of Investigations and Enforcement commenced a formal confidential investigation into the cause of the complaints and the complications related to Central Hudson's customer and billing system upgrade. Today, we are publicly releasing the report of our office's findings, which are current as of November. We reserve the ability to augment those findings depending on additional information. The draft order for your consideration would initiate a formal administrative process focused on enforcement-related issues. It is not a final conclusion. It is not a verdict of the Commission. Regarding potential next steps, depending on the company's response, this matter is likely to return to the Commission for further action. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Rossi to summarize the OIE report.
Thank you, John. The report lays out the information OIE has obtained and reviewed. It summarizes the current state of the investigation. Thank you. And it is available to the public. For those reasons, I will simply summarize some of the OIE findings, and I've prepared a brief slide deck. To put this investigation in context, back in June of 2018, the Commission approved funding for modernization of Central Hudson's customer information and billing systems. The approval was in part based on Central Hudson's representations that it needed to build a system that could handle non-traditional, complex billing scenarios such as community distributed generation, CDG, net metering, and retail choice. Central Hudson's stated goals were to improve customer experience, improve system performance and resilience, improve productivity and efficiency, and to create a seamless customer experience. The new system went live on September 1st, 2021, and it was riddled with defects from the start. At go live, there were hundreds of major and critical defects within the system, some of it which Central Hudson was aware of, and some of which it was not. System problems resulted in overcharges, delayed bills, improper estimates, automatic withdrawals from customers' bank accounts for multiple months' worth of bills, negative impacts on community solar and retail energy products, and a precipitous decline in customer service and satisfaction. OIE's investigation reveals that the system problems were foreseeable, avoidable, and were the direct result of company mismanagement. OIE found that Central Hudson failed to properly test the system, failed to properly staff the project, failed to properly train the staff it did have, failed to listen to its staff when concerns were raised regarding testing and overall readiness, and failed to resolve those concerns, failed to communicate effectively within the company, and failed to communicate effectively with its customers and the public. Following implementation, the system caused overcharges affecting over 8,000 customers, including net meter customers, budget bill customers, heat participants, and others. Following implementation, the system caused delayed billing for thousands of customers. Some delayed billing continues to this day. As you can see from the slide, the company's metrics reflect that billing exceptions were below 1,000 prior to go live and jumped to 20,000 in September, 40,000 in November, and 60,000 in March. As of September of this year, the exceptions were still 10 times what they were before launch. Following implementation, Central Hudson's customer service performance indicators showed sharp declines. Following go live, Central Hudson missed its customer satisfaction goal of 89% every month from September 2021 to today. In August of last year, prior to go live, over 89% of Central Hudson customers were satisfied with their service. Today, that number is 61%. Following go live, the percentage of customers who describe themselves as dissatisfied or very dissatisfied with their service increased dramatically. Following go live, the percentage of adjusted bills, which had remained below 2% in each of the first 3 quarters of 2021, jumped to double digits in September and October, and was in double digits every month in 2022, hitting a high of over 20% in March. Between go live on September 1st, 2021, and 1 year later on September 1st, 2022, the DPS Office of Consumer Services received over 2,000 complaints related to high bills, estimated bills, inaccurate bills, and delayed bills. By comparison, the call center had received fewer than 200 similar complaints for the 2 years prior to the system change. In our report, OIE alleges that Central Hudson has committed several apparent violations, including violations of the Public Service Law, regulations, and commission orders. The report provides evidence that Central Hudson demanded unjust and unreasonable charges to thousands of customers, failed to provide adequate service by failing to provide bills in a timely fashion. The company used estimated billing in a manner inconsistent with the Public Service Law and commission orders, and the company inappropriately backbilled customers. Turning to the issue of prudence, a related though separate issue, the report contains information that Central Hudson's management of the project unreasonably and imprudently incurred costs associated with the development, planning, management, and implementation of the deployment of the new CIS and billing system. The proposed order before you for consideration requires Central Hudson to answer to the allegations contained within the report and to show cause within 30 days why the Commission shouldn't commence a prudence proceeding and or a penalty action pursuant to the Public Service Law. The order also requires Central Hudson to submit within 30 days of the date of this order to department staff, 1, a plan to adjust the company's billing practices to conduct actual meter reads each month for its electric and gas service customers, and to discontinue its practice of alternate month billing estimates for its customer accounts. And two, a study evaluating if monthly meter reading and an end to alternate month bill estimates is in the interests of the company's customers. Staff is available for any questions you may have.
So I, again, want to thank the Office of Investigations and Enforcements for its thorough review of the events concerning Central Hudson's transition to this new billing system. I want to note that this investigation is separate and apart from the ongoing annual management audit, an audit which is conducted periodically for all utilities. Now, the findings in this report, which I think you mentioned are publicly available, will be at the conclusion of today's session, summarizes your findings to date about the events leading up to September 1st and the start of their transition, as well as the company's actions after the transition. In addition to this ongoing investigation, I want to note that the Office of Consumer Services is closely monitoring the status of customer complaints and is also monitoring Central Hudson's progress in addressing and remedying the concerns raised during this period. So again, this order to show cause will move us one step closer to addressing this issue. And once we receive the response and it's subsequently reviewed by your office, the Commission will then determine the need for any subsequent actions. So I want to thank you for your time today and go to comments from Commissioner Brown.
Thank you. I want to thank staff for the diligence in this report. For me, there are two things that I'm sort of focused on. Really, the first is that I am aware of the toll that this takes on both the staff and customers of Central Hudson. We have 4 ongoing matters that we're addressing. We're addressing the February 4th winter storm response investigation. We're addressing the management and operations audit. We're addressing the customer information and billing system modification review. And then we're addressing today what brings us to the order to show cause. And they're all separate. However, there is a lot of overlap. Central Hudson is a small company, and they have traditionally had significant positive customer engagement. Here, I am cognizant of the fact that the employees who are still trying to do all that they need to do for service to the customers, especially during the winter when they're involved in winter planning as well, must feel very much overwhelmed by all that is now on their plate. And so I really just, for me, looking at it from that perspective, I need to remind them that this is part of the process to ensure that we're doing all that we can moving forward to ensure that we get back to the business of customer service, safe and reliable, and that their job is to do what they're always been doing, which is to do that as diligently as they can. But I recognize the weight of that, especially at this time. So it's important for me to at least acknowledge that some of what I'm thinking about is all of that. The second are the customers, really, and the most importantly, in ensuring them that we are due diligently looking at all of these issues, that we're working with the company and others to ensure that we are helping to move forward and resolve these issues. And so I do appreciate the chair's comments on what we are doing, especially with the Office of Consumer Services, because that's really sort of extremely important. As to this order to show cause, which I'll be voting in favor of, I do just want to remind folks that this order to show cause does not state any conclusions or findings, other than that the report given to us provides sufficient enough concern to require Central Hudson to now have to answer the allegations that are contained in the report, and that we're not making any findings in support or against the report itself. We're not rendering a final determination today. The report by the Department of Staff in the Office of Investigation and Enforcement includes information that, if substantiated, can raise concerns. The company is entitled to review the report. It will be released today, and to present its response to the report and today's order to show cause. After the company has had the opportunity to respond, we will then decide the next steps as appropriate. And I look forward to that engagement. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, but I do support the request for an investigation based on this detailed and objective presentation. And depending on the outcome, we might be presented with opportunities to improve customer service, establish a solid business model for the industry as a whole, and instill overall confidence in the future operations of the company. And I'll be voting yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I am too awaiting the investigation, but what I will say that based on the report that we just heard from the Office of Investigation, it appears that the company failed in their overall stated goals, which was, did they improve customer service? No. Did they improve system performance and reliance? No. Did they improve productivity and efficiency? No. And did they create a seamless customer experience? No. So even if we just look at their own stated goals, they didn't meet them, which looks like it was preventable. So we'll see what the investigation bears out. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. I also want to welcome Mr. Rossi for his first presentation. Good job. This is seriously concerning, and I don't believe, and particularly if you've read the Hudson Valley Press, there are thousands of angry people. I mean, very angry people. And we put, this company, I think, put dozens, if not hundreds, of families in economic real harm, particularly those that were relying on automatic bill withdrawal. Again, a few $100s or $500 either way can really throw a household budget, way out of kilter. One thing that, as we do this investigation, which I hope is thorough yet prompt, since there is a great deal of anger out there. One thing that occurs to me is that since my time on the commission, every time a company wants to install a new piece of software, whether regarding billing, outage management, you name it, it doesn't go right. It just doesn't go right. And I would hope that one of the lessons that learned that we get out of this proceeding is, before this commission and staff lets companies launch these big new platforms, that we have real assurance that they're going to work on day one. And if they don't, that there's provisions by which to immediately rectify the problems that may exist. As we know, there are multiple companies right now that have billing issues. The other issue will become, and I hope we'll take a great look at, is the issue of headcount. If utilities don't have enough people to read meters, that's a problem. And it's not an acceptable excuse. Well, we just didn't have the people. Well, this commission grants sufficient revenues to companies to do that prime function. And again, I think there's two things: to get to the root cause and as good of outcome we can for customers on this, but use this as an opportunity to really look at as we launch software platforms. And as we look into the future, they will be more complex. The system will be 100% reliable, relying on them. And in this case, the failure has been largely economic. When it comes to actual service and that failure, that would be equally and actually more unacceptable than this. But again, I look forward to the outcome, and I do hope it's swift.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It strikes me as much of the work that is done by the outstanding public servants here at the Department of Public Service is often done in relative anonymity. Quite often, doesn't draw headlines, it doesn't draw attention, but that's certainly not the case here. So when I acknowledge, Dave, you and your team, and you, John, the incredible work that you've done in this investigation and compiling this report, I know, and I think it's important for everyone to know, that it was certainly not done and has not been done in relative anonymity. It has been done in front of a pretty bright spotlight. There are, as Commissioner Howard indicated earlier, hundreds, if not thousands, of customers of Central Hudson who have rightfully been very vocal about what has happened. There has been properly intense media scrutiny about what has been going on. There have been numerous legislators at the state level, at the county level, at the local level, who have been in touch with certainly myself, and I think probably all of my colleagues here on the commission as well. So it's been a bright spotlight that you have done your work thus far. And I think that's important to underscore, because from what I have seen, you have exercised the diligence that it has taken to come to bring this investigation to this point now. But this is only one point along the path, and certainly this is the point at which we as commissioners enter the process, I guess, through our consideration of this order to show cause. It's certainly, in my opinion, the reasons to do this order to show cause are numerous. It is important that the process continue from this point, and in that regard, I'll certainly be not only supporting the order, but anxiously awaiting the response of the company to some very serious allegations that you indicate in your report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
A little closer to the mic would be helpful.
Okay. Some of the issues that you raised in this report are...
I'm sorry. Can you please speak louder?
Okay. Is this any good? Can you hear me?
It's better, but I know that's awkward for you. Can we get a different mic? There we go.
Can you hear me better on this mic?
Can you?
A little better.
Yes.
You hear me better on
Oh, much better. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay. All right. So the issues that you're raising in this presentation are obviously very, very concerning. I'm going to withhold making any comments beyond that, but I do have a question. The term prudence used in this context, I think, has a more specific meaning than it has in day-to-day conversation. And for the sake of anybody listening in, I was hoping you could describe in greater detail what that means in this context.
Good morning, Commissioner John Sipos here in Albany. Yes, I think you put your finger on a very important question. The term prudence does have a specific term in the utility regulation space that we are in. It is, it really, another way of thinking about prudence is thinking about the term, what is reasonable? What would a reasonable person or a reasonable corporation do in a situation such as this? What would a reasonable, responsible company do if it was faced with an initiative of rolling out a new computer system? So prudence does have a specific meaning in utility regulation. This commission in the past has initiated, conducted, and completed prudence reviews. There is the case from the late 70s involving Indian Point Unit 2, where the commission found that an outage, a refueling outage, went on too long through inadequate advanced planning. There's also the case, I'm sure folks remember, about the Long Island Lighting Company in Shoreham, where this commission also weighed in, finding that certain actions there reflected either poor planning, mismanagement, or inefficiency. So really what prudence is were the actions that the company took reasonable to the task or the challenge that the company was confronted with? And I think, there are just, I guess I would close by saying there's, the focus could be on certain sub aspects of the challenge or the overall project in general. Did the project meet the objectives that it set out to, or did it merely replicate the system that already existed there? So I hope that provided some background and context to your question.
Yes, thank you very much. That's all I have. I'll also be voting in support.
Thank you both. So I'm going to do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to institute a proceeding to direct Central Hudson Gas and Electric to show cause as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. The vote is approved and the recommendations are adopted. We'll now move on to the second item for discussion on today's agenda. Item 301, case 15-E-0302, as it relates to the 2023 Clean Energy Standard administrative funding. This will be presented today by Marco Padula, Director of the Office of Markets and Innovation, Tom Dwyer, Assistant Counsel, and Pete Sheehan, Utility Analyst, are also available for questions. Marco, please begin when you are ready.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. Item 301 is a draft order in case 15E-0302, proceeding on motion of the Commission to implement a large-scale renewable program and a clean energy standard, addressing New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA's requests for administrative funding for the 2023 CES compliance year. As you are aware, NYSERDA has been designated by the Commission as the administrator of the CES program and is required to file a petition yearly to recover the costs associated with administering the program. On July 29, 2022, NYSERDA filed a petition seeking Commission approval of $38.8 million in funds to cover its estimated costs and fees for administering the CES program for the 2023 compliance year. This funding would cover the administration of the Renewable Energy Standard, which is comprised of tiers 1, 2, and 4, and the offshore wind standard, and the zero emissions credit program. The NYSERDA proposed budget for 2023 represents an increase of approximately $8.6 million, or 29% over the 2022 authorized budget of $30.2 million. NYSERDA proposed to fund the Renewable Energy Standard admin budget with surplus revenues received during previous years, including bid fees, contract security forfeitures, alternative compliance payments, and interest income. For the ZEC program, NYSERDA proposed to continue to fund the program's admin functions through an adder. The petition was published for comment in the State Register on August 24th, 2022, and comments were received by the Alliance for Clean Energy of New York and the Clean Energy Parties, which are comprised of National Resource Defense Council, New York League of Conservation Voters, the Nature Conservancy, Sierra Club, Environmental Advocates of New York, Scenic Hudson, New Yorkers for Clean Power, and American Farmland Trust. All commenters support NYSERDA's petition and recommend approval. In the draft order before you, the Commission approves with modifications NYSERDA's request for the 2023 CES admin funds. The modifications include downward adjustments to the proposed number of new full-time equivalents and the proposed technical support budget. Related to FTEs, or full-time equivalents, NYSERDA requests additional staffing of 19 full-time equivalents to the existing 22.25 FTEs currently on staff. The draft order recognizes the need for additional FTEs in the areas of contract management, solicitation support, legal, and offshore wind support, while also recognizing the existing level of CES program managers and the number of FTEs in NYSERDA's communications and corporate marketing departments. The modifications include rejecting the addition of 5 of the incremental 19 FTEs requested. The 5 include 2 strategy and policy development project managers, 1 communications project manager, 1 marketing project manager, and 1 junior analyst. The reduction to the overall budget associated with the removal of these positions totals $1.3 million. With this reduction, the addition to salary and overhead represents a 31.3% increase in salary and overhead over the 2022 budget. These additional new hires will enable NYSERDA to add skill sets to comply with new initiatives, such as the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act and the New York Buy American Act, excuse me, layered on top of the CES general requirements related to the operation of the programs. The petition also requests funding for technical support, which includes costs associated with ongoing consultant support, development of RFPs, technical evaluation panels for NYSERDA procurements. The request for these services increase approximately 38% over the 2022 budgeted level. Represents an increase of approximately 38%. The scope of the technical support work includes long-term forecasting for solicitation evaluations, various analyses required to meet the state's climate goals, like the Offshore Wind Master Plan 2.0, assessing transmission constraints, and purchase of proprietary data sets, such as forecasts of future energy and capacity prices. Similar to the reductions in the requested increases to the full-time equivalents, the draft order adopts an overall reduction of $4.2 million in the requested 2023 technical support budget. This represents a 25% reduction in the technical support budget requested and will result in an increase in the budget of 3.3% compared to the 2022 budget. The draft order finds that this reduction is justified, given that several of the technical support items proposed by NYSERDA are either insufficiently justified or represent an excessive commitment to resources outside of NYSERDA. In addition, the draft order finds that a reduction to the technical support budget commensurate with the reduction in the number of FTEs is appropriate given the relationship between these categories of support and the increased FTEs authorized in this order should provide NYSERDA with the internal technical resources to reduce the need for third-party technical support. Overall, the draft order finds that the modifications to the proposed budget will balance the need to administer and implement the continued growth and success of New York's clean energy standard effectively while minimizing ratepayer impacts. Finally, the draft order authorizes NYSERDA to use the previously collected revenues to fund the 2023 ZEC program administrative costs and fund the 2023 ZEC program administrative costs through the ZEC adder. Also, NYSERDA shall continue to file quarterly reports containing itemized expenses associated with the administration of the Renewable Energy Standard and ZEC credit programs. That concludes my presentation, and we are available for any questions.
Thank you, Marco. I appreciate your review and bringing this to us today. When the Commission first acted on the Clean Energy Standard in 2016, the approach and management structure to meet the targets of New York's energy and environmental goals were first established. And since then, the goals of both the CES program, the goals of the CES program have evolved in tandem with the funding to meet growing needs. The CES modification order and the offshore wind framework orders you mentioned earlier are being two recent examples, further expanding the scope of that original ambition. With the passage of the CLCPA, which set even higher renewable energy and GHG reduction goals, the CES now serves as the tool for meeting the requirements of these statutory directives and is the prime driver for enabling the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act goals. What we've seen here today highlights how far we've come since 2016. As you mentioned, projects have evolved in size and complexity, and the requirements are greater than they were when we first began. And based on the integration analysis conducted as part of the scoping plan, the number of projects completed each year is likely to rise over time. So adoption of the NYSERDA administrative budget today will enable the continued growth of clean renewable generation in New York State. And for these reasons, I will be supporting the draft order. Thank you. Commissioner Berman?
Thank you so much. I want to take a moment to thank staff. It's clear you did a very thorough job and tried to sharpen the pencils in what was put before you. I'm not going to be voting for this item today, and I want to explain my vote. It is not it is not against NYSERDA, and it is not against the goals that we have for our state energy policies. We are stewards of the ratepayer monies, and that's something that I take very seriously. We need more resources across the board to do our job, not just at NYSERDA, but everywhere. But we also need to be mindful of where those dollars are coming from. And our job is seeking funding. In 2019, the petition came before us. At that time, the only commenter on the item after the petition was SAPID was the joint utilities, and the joint utilities at that time noted that NYSERDA was proposing to more than double the funding necessary to administer the RES at the time, and pointed out that the NYSERDA's administrative costs represented a significant portion of the total program costs, And the joint utilities were also focused on the number of ACPs being paid to NYSERDA by LSEs, and that was increasing and was expected to trend upwards. The joint utilities did request in their comments at that time that the commission would require NYSERDA to develop a spending and investment plan for ACP funds and to file such plan for public comment. And they also requested that ACP funds be returned to customers in a fair and an equitable manner. We did not approve that request by the JUs, the joint utilities, under the rationale that we had other reporting and filing requirements that we asked NYSERDA to do, and that was unnecessary. I did vote no at the time, and the focus was I didn't think that we had enough in the petition to support it, and I also was concerned that we were just adopting the petition in whole and making no modifications to it, and that concerned me that it seemed like we were just checking the box and just a pass-through, and the stewardship of the ratepayer funds did not seem to be due diligently dealt with. Then in October of 2020, where there was an order adopting modification to the clean energy standard. There were a number of different issues that came up in that petition separate from the administrative funding. I voted no on that order for a number of different reasons, but also as to the stewardship of ratepayer dollars as well. I point out that in that order, we did also note that none of the comments that came in on that order addressed administrative funding. And in the order, the commission was looking to address the funding elements that were raised in the white paper. And again, no comments were received on that specific issue. So the commission found that combining the administrative funding reporting and proposals for all clean energy standard programs in one comprehensive annual funding request would provide stakeholders with a clear and comprehensive opportunity to review and comment on the costs of administrating the combined CES portfolio of programs. And so NYSERDA was then directed to file a comprehensive annual petition regarding funding for the CES programs for years 2022 and beyond. I also, as I said before, I also voted no at that time, thinking it was not sufficient, and also we were adopting without really any modifications to the funding in any real way, and it concerned me, and we were not getting under the hood about the concerns I have about the increasing ratepayer dollars being used and seeming to not really be enough due diligence in adequately overseeing NYSERDA's funding request. So then in December 2021, there was an order approving the 2022 Clean Energy Standard Administrative Budget. I voted no at that time as well, for similar reasons. And I do note that there were no public comments filed in support or opposition to that. So we've had the history of 3 petitions, and only at that time only 1 comment had been made by the joint utilities. And so the absence of those comments were troubling to me as well. Here, we now have a petition that is put forward, and we got 2 comments. One from ACE New York, and one was a coalition of clean energy partners, or that's what they call themselves, CEP, which represents a number of different entities. And they support the administration, us adopting the need for them to have their administrative funding budget approved. I was struck, though, when I read those comments, that I did not think that they really gave any real under-the-hood detail, flushing out the support. It was really sort of, frankly, general, yes, we believe that NYSERDA needs this to do an ever-increasing workload, and it's important to us. I recognize that. But I was left struck by the fact that many of them are also looking for funding from NYSERDA. So it left me a little uncomfortable that they were submitting it, especially because they had not submitted before. And it struck me as something that is important for us to be mindful of, because petitions that have comments that come in, the commenters, especially ones that generally give a much more substantive analysis of things, should not just be mere support letters. We recognize that every state agency needs the proper resources. So I didn't feel that those commenters added anything, and generally made me just a bit concerned about where that was coming from and why now. Why not the other years? Why now? So I just raised that because I do think that it's important for us to understand that. And also, I don't want this to be that NYSERDA or others feel they need to get support letters to say, generic, yes, we need more resources. I understand that. So here now we have a proposal that was submitted, and staff did try to sharpen the pencils and reduce the funding request in terms of staffing and the technical budget. However, I don't think that it went far enough. And the reason for that is not that they're not deserving, but I don't necessarily see that the petition lays out clear accountability for how that increased amount is actually going to be for the benefit of the ratepayers. Again, it's a usage of the ratepayer funding. And so when I look to this, I do think that, as Winston Churchill said, however beautiful the strategy, we need to look at the results. I want to see that they're also showing from their past requests that there were results oriented that can prove that, yes, the increase of these resources actually produced X results. And without that, we would not have been able to do that. And then have that really challenged and made sure that that analysis is actually sound. So for me, it concerns me because I don't think that just because we increase the staffing, we're going to see perhaps definite results to that. Here, I'm also mindful that this petition, as well as the other 3 petitions, NYSERDA is, while giving detail on what they are looking at doing in their workload, it really comes down to the fact that the legislative directives through the CLCPA has increased their workload, that they need to now manage it, including in this most recent petition, talking about staffing for the Climate Action Council and other CLCPA related items. I'm struck by that because that is for every state agency to be cognizant of the increased workload from the legislative directives, whether it's the CLCPA and many other ones that are related and spun off for that. I don't see that there is a due diligence in addressing not just the administrative costs that will be increasing for the CLCPA, but for all other costs. And that, for me, it should be a more holistic, statewide, real analysis and review, because I don't think it's fair for us to say, yes, NYSERDA is very deserving of all of this. However, our agency and other agencies also have a large role, if not in some ways, especially as it relates to things like reliability, a larger role. And so I'm not comfortable in carving out such an increase because of the really sort of pancaking of the requirements related to the CLCPA, which I think requires a deeper dive statewide on what that looks like, and the proper usage of administrative resources and the dollar amounts that would be attached to that. I also am cognizant that the way, at least as it seems to me, staff approached this review, which I think was sound, was to try to do it as due diligently as we do utility rate review in looking at their funding requests for staffing. However, it is not the same. There is a much more deeper dive done when we look at utility funding through our rate case review, through engagement in testimony that's put forward, challenges to that, and then others involved in that stakeholder process. Second, when we were looking at it from the utility perspective, we also do a prudence review of the expenses that were incurred and look at that. And third, we do management and operations audits of the utilities through an independent process, and one that also has public comment and the use of an independent auditor. I think the process here, when we go back to the order that pushed everything into one, is not actually giving us what the order tried to do, which again, I remind folks, it said that we hope that by doing this and having it in one comprehensive annual funding request will provide stakeholders with a clear and comprehensive opportunity to review and comment on the costs of administrating the combined CES portfolio programs. That hasn't happened. We don't have a robust stakeholder process in this, and we don't have others helping us to sharpen the pencils. I also think it's very difficult for our staff to be the ones who have to be sharpening the pencils of their sister agencies, and then also the very same staff that are doing that are subject to then having to work with their colleagues across sister agencies, knowing that they may, it's an awkward situation at best, but I think it presents itself as problematic, especially because our staff can say, yeah, we need resources too. And by the way, we need resources to oversee you. So if we're giving you all of this, it makes it harder because some of what the petition says is we need to do this because we need to do a review of, for example, offshore wind and what's happening in that process. Well, our staff is the ones that have to review all of that, and NYSERDA and the utilities. And so I think that the case actually should be flipped in a way that's much more comprehensive statewide on what is an appropriate jurisdictional reach here. How do we ensure that we are properly managing the increasing funding that's going to be needed to do this? And how do we do it in a way that we are stewards of our ratepayer dollars, but then also what else is there, that it's not just coming from ratepayer dollars. And I think that that's really at the core. And I think that it requires us to perhaps rethink how we actually manage and oversee this NYSERDA budget in a way that actually is much more robust in substantive analysis, but also parity among the state agencies and also parity among the funding streams, whether it's public or private, and also looking at who are the proper people or proper entities to be doing certain substantive issues. And some of what NYSERDA is asking for are very new things that no matter how much we give them in terms of resources, they don't necessarily have the current expertise and will then have to even then be sort of at a learning curve, when perhaps we may need to rethink what is the practical reality of that. We have, for example, an offshore wind consortium that has perhaps the ability to have private dollars and federal dollars be utilized to have technical expertise. And while NYSERDA is involved in that, and DPS and others are involved in that, it doesn't mean that NYSERDA needs more resources to then become the technical experts, that they may still have to rely on those same people. So with all of that, it leads me back to what is the proper way forward, and how can we think differently about ensuring that we are being accountable to the ratepayers in our stewardship of the ratepayer funding, and how can we better help and manage this for staff to not be put in this position, but also for staff to have the resources in the oversight that we as a commission are responsible for in working through some of these challenges. And I think that that requires us to ask all the stakeholders, what's preventing you from leaning in? And what is a better way for us to do this so that we are all ensuring that we're moving forward in a responsible way, and our fiduciary responsibility is not taken for granted. So with that, I will be voting no on this item.
Thank you. Commissioner Elise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, as I see it. NYSERDA correctly anticipates with this request that there'll be increased workloads in various areas, whether it's legal, management, technical planning, et cetera.
Sorry,
Things.
so sorry to interrupt you, Commissioner. Would you be so kind as to speak up or get a little bit closer to the mic and start over? We're having a bit of trouble hearing you here.
I'll be supporting the issue and I'll be voting yes, and I'd like to say good job on Marco in the hot seat today.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I have a different perspective on this. I really believe that we, as a commission, have an obligation to make this work and to make all of the piece parts work and be supportive so that we can do what we need to do by 2030. We codified the CLCPA in 2016, and I believe that we have to ask ourselves that who will suffer the most if this is not going to work? And the answer to me would be the small businesses and the most vulnerable communities and our future generation. I was heartened to see the release this morning by the DEC that is trying to pull all the pieces together. I would encourage all of the commissioners to read that as I did this morning. You know, I look at this in two fashions. You know, we can cut the legs off of the pieces and really make sure that this doesn't work by not giving it proper funding. You know, it's like buying a new car but taking away the steering wheel and the engine, not having the mechanic. It's being on a school board and then trying to run the district. We really have to, I believe, in my opinion, not micromanage the NYSERDA leadership and the skill sets that they believe need to be done. Quite frankly, I would have had supported this in total, because I do think it's important to have strategy and policy development project managers. I do think it's important to have communications and technical support and a marketing manager, and I absolutely think it's important to have a junior analyst so that we can mentor people along the way. I think it's a leadership issue, and if in NYSERDA's best judgment that they believe that these skill sets are important, I think that we should be supportive as well. However, from an overall perspective, I do think that it's our obligation to work with all parties and raise the flag on the overall cost of doing this work. That I do believe is important. But I don't think that the answer is to say no to individual pieces of the work. I think that we should encourage the state legislature under the governor's leadership to look at this in a holistic approach and provide the funding necessary to all agencies so that we can, at a macro perspective, get this work done. We have to fully fund it so that it is not on all of the ratepayers, but I do not think that we should be scrutinizing individual projects and voting no based on cost alone. The issue is really how do we better fund the overall cost, and I see that what was released this morning in final comment is the DEC piece of it. I think that is a way to accomplish this. It's not only funding, but it's also reminding all of the agencies, including ours, that we need to assess where we are in light of the climate change considerations and requirements of the CLCPA. It's our obligation to do that. So I think that policy is something that we need to read and reread and reread. But I do think that the state legislature, as I said before, under the governor's leadership, we need to do what we can to do from a funding perspective so that we can get this over the finish line. And in my opinion, we have the legal and moral obligation to do so. And I will be supporting this. And I would have supported it without the modifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you. Marco, I have a few questions regarding NYSERDA, and I'll tie them all together at the end. Is NYSERDA subject to the New York Civil Service Law?
No.
Is NYSERDA part of the state's fiscal plan as overseen by the Division of the Budget?
Are you saying, do they get any money from the budget process? And if that's the case, there's a small amount that they receive through the Public Service Law 18A surcharge dollars that are dealt with in that way.
Is that largely in support of the State Energy Office function and West Valley?
Yes.
Is NYSERDA part of any union bargaining agreement?
They are not.
And is NYSERDA contracting and spending to New York State Comptroller pre-audit function?
When you say pre-audit, there's no pre-authorization. The comptroller does have oversight after the fact.
Thank you. The reason I ask these questions is NYSERDA is not a state agency. It's an authority. It's an authority unique among authorities, inasmuch as that it has no assets that it derives direct revenue from. The revenue either comes from the state general fund, or the vast majority comes from ratepayer dollars to pay not only for its administrative function, but also whatever contracts that they sign, particularly when it comes to procurement of zero emission resources. You know, NYSERDA's come a long way since the 1960s, when it was designed to be an agency, an entity that would reprocess nuclear waste at profit and then spawn a brand new industry. It then morphed into an agency that had to clean up the mess from the West Valley reprocessing site. We used to have an independent state energy office. That was eliminated. That was rolled into the NYSERDA function. And again, moving from a state agency direct approach model to something else, again, I think is very important. You know, and many state government agencies have experienced mission creep over their lives. In NYSERDA's case, mission hyper creep has happened, particularly since 2015. And I believe that given that NYSERDA will issue hundreds of billions of dollars worth of contracts as part of its CLCPA, as part of the CLCPA mandates, it is time for greater oversight of NYSERDA, not just from DPS, but I believe from the Comptroller's Office as well. If the state legislature and the public are greatly concerned about committing state commitments made in state contracts, i.e. the Buffalo Billion, for example, they should be equally concerned for the contracts let by NYSERDA that quite honestly dwarf the Buffalo Billion in their size and magnitude. Before this commission, and this, I guess the question is, Marco, when do we see a reset of these programs that may require additional ratepayer dollars? Is there a time that we see in the future when they will come to the commission for new ratepayer dollars?
If you're suggesting, would you see like another CES white paper that you saw a couple of years back? The answer is yes, probably in another, 2 to 3 years, where we then look to the next step. How do you reach the 100 by 40 and the 2050 goals as well?
Well, thank you. And my opinion, before this commission is called upon to increase the cost to ratepayers, I believe that real meaningful oversight needs to be put in place. Do not interpret my statements here as a criticism of NYSERDA's performance to date, because it is not. It is the transparency that I'm worried about and concerned about. Transparency will need necessarily to be the cornerstone of any reform, and particularly any reform that relates to CLCPA funding. And failure on this front will be the biggest single threat, I believe, to the state's decarbonization efforts. If folks don't believe in it and don't believe that we are spending wisely and that they are fully informed about how it is, they will react, and they will react negatively. That being said, I do want to praise the work of DPS staff on their sharpened pencil here. Would it were, and I think it's very important that we state here, we are the fiduciary body that oversees NYSERDA. It's not the state legislature. It's not the Division of Budget. It's not the controller. It's us. And with that responsibility, there's a reason we have a division of budget. There's a reason we have a complex controller's office. There's a reason we have a civil service law. There's a reason we have broad state procurement and contracting regulations. It's to preserve the respect for the public's money. And to my mind, it doesn't matter if the money comes from the public via the taxman or through this commission's ability to raise money through people's utilities bills. It's all the same money. So again, I do want to praise you for the work you've done. I do want to make sure that we can move this process forward and that these positions, to the extent that they are necessary to do that. However, we need a change. We need a change, and we need to let everybody know what's happening, because failure to do that, I believe, will result in some very negative consequences. Well, that being said, however, that this order doesn't require any new ratepayer dollars, I actually will be supporting it. However, anything that going forward that puts our hands into ratepayers' pockets for this or any other expense, either borne directly by utilities or by NYSERDA, I believe will receive much higher scrutiny than we have to date. But that being said, thank you, Marco, and thank you, Tom, for your work.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me just first start by acknowledging the comments that all commissioners who have spoken already have added to the record. I think it's all very helpful, and particularly, historical lessons are important, whether it be the history of the clean energy standard as described by Commissioner Berman, or in many ways the history of NYSERDA itself, or at least going back to the 1990s, at that point in time when the then State Energy Office was folded into NYSERDA, as Commissioner Howard briefly mentioned earlier. I think that's all extremely helpful as we consider items that come before us. Specifically as to the petition in front of us today, I just wanted to share, and Marco, in thanking you for the work that you and your staff did with those pencils that were sharpened. I just want to share a line that I think summarizes my perspective quite well. Talking about surplus funds that are used to carry out the administrative cost of the 2023 program. And then you go on to say that the requested positions and technical support additions must be carefully considered from a need perspective, and many have spoken about that earlier, and conservatively balanced against current ratepayer obligations, including rising electricity costs. Including rising electricity costs. And we're 2 or 3 months in from our own internal winter forecast about rising electricity cost. We're all seeing rising electricity costs in our monthly bills as we speak. So again, I just want you to know how much I appreciate that you have incorporated the current burdens on electric ratepayers in your review and modification of this petition, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori.
Thank you. First of all, as my colleagues have said, good work, Marco and Tom. I have 2 questions, and then I'm going to make a couple comments on my vote. The first question is this: in broad terms, how are we doing on meeting the goals established in the Clean Energy Standard Order, the 50 by 30, the 0 by 40, and how is NYSERDA doing in advancing our progress towards those goals?
I can take that. So, Commissioner Marjorie, if you look at the current renewable projects that are under construction or have been awarded contract or that have been built, NYSERDA is reporting right on their website. Everybody can see it, that they're at 66% of the 70 by 30 goal. So they're at 66% right now with that. So I would say overall they're meeting the objectives that the commission has laid out. They are on the path to meeting the ultimate objectives.
Thank you. My second question is, the proposed increase, around 30%, should we be surprised at an increase of this magnitude? Or should we have seen it coming? And looking forward, should we expect a similar increase the next time we do this?
So I don't think it comes as a surprise, given that if you look at the goals, as you stated, the 70 by 30, 100 by 40, as well as the goals of the offshore wind requirement of 9,000 megawatts by 2025. NYSERDA has, for the last 6 years, for example, done annual procurements for the Tier 1 resources, and they're on their third procurement for offshore wind. So the offshore wind procurement is on the street today. There's the 6th Tier 1 procurement that's on the street. And those things, those bids will come back. The analysis will, tremendous amount of analysis is done on those responses to the RFPs that come back, and that's expected to happen next year. In addition, they are thinking about what is the next offshore wind procurement. What will that look like, and what will the next tier 1 procurement look like? So, I would say it was expected. In terms of would this level of request be something that we should see year to year? I don't think so. I don't think we'll see a 33% increase in admin for the subsequent year. Maybe there will be some gradual increase as we continue to work toward the 2040 timeframe. But as far as year to year increases of 30%, I wouldn't expect that year over year in the short term.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to add a couple comments. I appreciate both answers. As I'm sitting here listening to my colleagues, I am nodding along with a lot of what I'm hearing, and many of my colleagues expressed concerns or thoughts that I had much better than I could express them myself. I am going to vote yes on this, and I would like to say sort of broadly what I'm nodding along with is that the idea that the extent to which we could enhance our oversight function could only help NYSERDA doing the tasks that were assigned to it by that 2016 order. Now, I went back and looked at that 2016 order, which is referenced in the present order, because it really sort of establishes why we're doing this in the first place. And the role of NYSERDA is really highlighted. NYSERDA is mentioned over 170 times in that order. And the summary that of what NYSERDA is asked to do that is in this order, almost, if anything, it almost understates the responsibility that order placed on NYSERDA. That order also references several of what at the time were recent extreme weather events that had battered New York State that were fresh in people's minds back in 2016. And this order doesn't so much do that, but if we wanted to, we could have come up with a whole new list of extreme weather events that happened just since that time. I grew up in Buffalo, and just last month, there was the second 6-foot snowstorm in the last 8 years. The first 45 years of my life, even living through the blizzard of 77 and the ice storm of 85, we never experienced anything like that. And so the importance of what we're doing is no less diminished than it was in 2016. So I'm going to support this. I do want to emphasize that I think some of the concerns raised today should not be ignored, and I, broadly am glad that others raised them. But nonetheless, I think the importance of moving forward is paramount in my mind. We have 7 years to achieve that 50 by 30 goal, and I'm looking forward to the continued good work of NYSERDA and the continued good work of DPS in providing an oversight function. The extent to which it could be enhanced, I think, could only help us achieve our goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll now do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations to approve the 2023 Clean Energy Standard administrative funding with modifications as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
No.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and recommendations adopted. Thank you, everyone. Okay. We'll now move to our third item for discussion today, item 302, case 20-E-0197, as it relates to the request of New York State Electric and Gas Corporation for authorization to develop Phase 1 local transmission projects. It'll be presented today by Elizabeth Grisaro. Brandon Goodrich and Jerry Ancona are available for questions. Ms. Grisaro, please begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I'm very happy to be here with you to talk about these important local transmission projects. However, before we dive in, I think I'd like to take a minute to provide some background that I hope will be helpful in looking at these projects. This petition that's before you today seeks approval for the company to continue spending on developing a group of local transmission projects that the company asserts will be critical to supporting the state's objectives for new renewable generation. The petition response comes directly out of decisions that the Commission made in February of 2021 in the same proceeding in the order that we refer to as the Phase 1 order. There, the Commission recognized that some traditional utility investments in reliability and resilience of the transmission system could also have ancillary benefits in terms of creating additional headroom for renewable generation resources. The Commission defined this type of project as Phase 1 and instructed the utilities to identify projects with these characteristics in the rate cases going forward. Thus, the Phase 1 order and the Phase 1 designation enable the Commission to see what projects in a utility's capital plan have headroom benefits and to prioritize those where it might make sense to do so in the overall context of the rate case. At the same time, in the Phase 1 order, the Commission acknowledged that the state's climate goals codified in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act might require action sooner than the rate case cycle would permit. Therefore, the Phase 1 order authorized utilities to bring Phase 1 proposals forward via petitions in the circumstances where waiting for a rate case would jeopardize CLCPA deadlines. This safety valve allows the Commission to take action off-cycle where the CLCPA benefits associated with the reliability project are needed in the short term. NYSEG filed its petition in December of 2021 and identified at that time 23 projects for consideration under the off-cycle approach established in the Phase 1 order. NYSEG explained that the projects were developed through the company's routine reliability and asset maintenance planning studies and also showed how they would contribute to CLCPA goals by increasing headroom on the company's system. Several months later, the company filed a rate proceeding, which is ongoing at the present time. The same 23 local transmission projects are included in the rate filing with other proposed investments. Before you today is the narrow question of whether to approve the continuing development expenditure that NYSEG says is necessary to keep the projects on track to meet CLCPA deadlines, while the overall capital investment issues are being addressed in the rate case. Staff recommends that you approve development funding through the conclusion of the rate case, subject to an overall cap on the expenditure. Staff has looked closely at the proposals and focused on specifically identifying those elements of the projects that will actually contribute to headroom and therefore support the CLCPA targets. Staff's analysis broke down the 23 projects, as NYSEG originally described them, into 46 components for the purpose of conducting a more granular review, and concluded that 27 of the recategorized elements do qualify as Phase 1 projects within the scope and intent of the Phase 1 order. Staff also concluded that continued funding of these 27 component projects is necessary to ensure that they can be brought into service in time to support our 2030 CLCPA targets. Thus, the draft order before you authorizes spending for these projects up to a cap of $98.8 million through the end of NYSEG's current rate year. The other 19 components will be addressed with other reliability projects in the rate case. A determination here to approve the continued development of these projects while the rate case is pending addresses the risk that would otherwise arise if you deferred a decision to that other proceeding. As the Commission found in the Phase 1 order, it is appropriate to address CLCPA needs outside the rate case context when statutory deadlines might otherwise be missed. The draft order before you today protects against that risk and increases the likelihood that the transmission infrastructure needed to support our climate goals will be in place on time. Thank you, and we are happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. If you don't, I'm going to start off with a question or two. I think you used the term headroom several times in your presentation, and I think it'll be helpful if we could explain that for those listening in.
I would be happy to provide a layperson's explanation, but my terrific colleague Jerry Ancona can give you a more technical explanation.
Thank you for that, Jerry. Please.
Headroom is basically the ability for a renewable generator or any generator to have its output delivered to load. So a generator can basically serve local load because they're very close, so there's no impediments between them. But to the extent that local load is much lower than the generator's output, the power needs to go outside the region, and that's where headroom that comes up. If the transmission, the system has enough capability to export that the generator, then it has sufficient headroom. So in a nutshell, headroom is the ability for a generator to deliver its output to load without the restriction. Does that answer the
I'm gonna say what I heard.
Yes.
So in these areas right now, we can't add additional generation because there's insufficient headroom? Is that what you mean? We can't build new generation, we can't build new renewables in these areas where these projects are being placed?
Yeah. These areas can handle a certain amount of generation, but the existing the system that results in the curtailment of the renewables.
Got it. So we could
Yes.
get more power from whatever renewables we could build.
Yes. So if you upgrade the transmission, you can get more the renewable the generation to deliver to external loads farther away.
Got it. Okay. And I know on so a follow-up question, both to you, Jerry, or Elizabeth. Within the order, there's a list of the amount of headroom that's created, right? So this means additional generation could be built up to that amount in these respected areas. And I think the areas in question were Lancaster, Lockport, Ithaca, Binghamton, and Oneonta. Is that right?
That
Yes.
sounds right? Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure it's clear. Great.
Yep.
So Again, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for taking time to answer my questions. I think back to when the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act was passed. The commission at the time was directed by the legislature in partnership with our sister agencies in the New York ISO to identify these upgrades, to identify the cost effectiveness of these upgrades and the suitability of them in meeting our state's renewable energy goals. But the prime driver, I want to be clear on these, is reliability. That's the initial screen. We're here today to talk about a reliability need that happens to also coincide with meeting and supporting a CLCPA need. So ultimately, these are projects that we would be looking at, and we're looking at out of the rate case in part because a direction from the legislature to do so, given the expediency and the need to meet the goals of the CLCPA. So to reiterate what you said, the order before us today covers $98 million of investments.
I think 98.8, but yes.
Okay, I'll round up next time. Thank you. So $98.8 million in investments for the current rate year. So that's the next few months. Is that right?
That's through, I believe, end of May 2023.
End of May 20. Thank you for that.
End of April.
Oh, sorry.
End of April.
Correction, April 31, end of April.
April 31st,
Correct.
2023. Great, thank you.
That's
Okay.
assuming that the rate case is approved by April, by the end of April. So the rate case would take over.
Got it. Okay. And now, memory serves, this is now the second time we'll be moving forward with this. The first time being the National Grid order, which we did a few months ago for $700 million and move forward with. Is that right?
That's correct. This NYSEG's petition is the second petition seeking interim funding for Phase 1 projects. National Grid came first.
Got it. Okay. So thank you for that clarification. So again, I appreciate the detail in going through this and the various projects that have come before us. I like the fact that these projects are going to increase reliability and also provide economic development opportunities in the communities I mentioned earlier. And it's helpful to know that these projects are contributing in such a way that this near-term action is going to offer opportunities to enhance and improve service to customers and move us closer to meeting our state-required goals. So appreciate your work on putting this together, and I will be supporting this item. And I'll go to Commissioner Brown.
Thank you so much. Thanks for staff's clear hard work on this. It's important for me to underscore that I believe that the threshold issue in all that we're doing in the clean energy space is that reliability is paramount. I think that has to be clearly documented in a way that makes sure that we are doing all we can in that regard. That means that when we are in any arena where we're talking about our clean energy goals, the CLCPA, and implementation of that, we must make sure that the threshold issue of reliability is clearly understood. Sadly, in many arenas that I've been in recently, that has not been understood. And it seems that is something that weighs heavily on me, and I think the others who I think understand the importance of that issue of reliability. It's a threshold issue. If we allow reliability to be at risk, we are putting at risk our clean energy goals. However, I don't believe that if I vote no on this item, that I am putting at risk reliability. In fact, I think that I am being properly cognizant of the reliability issues and the role that we play and the place that the decisions get in terms of the dollars allocated to certain utility projects need to be done mindfully in appropriate other arenas, irrespective of whether or not we have already decided in the national grid. I'm going to kind of go through this in a way that explains where I'm coming from and is showcasing, I think, an alternative approach that frankly I think is the proper and prudent approach. We have to, as the commission, we have to follow legislative directives. We have to implement them. But we are not just okay, this is a legislative directive and this is how we're going to do it. We have to think carefully. We have to understand it. We have to look to careful implementation. And as we go along, if we see that there are challenges to the way we envision that implementation, we have to be willing to say, not necessarily the best approach now in light of what we're seeing, so perhaps we need to make some modifications, even if it is to our prior orders, in a way that allows the proper input and process and engagement from other stakeholders. So we have, as the chair noted, the Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Benefit Act, which requires the commission to, among other things, look at how to do transmission planning and investment differently towards the achievement of the targets established by the CLCPA. That's clear. And so part of our challenge in then taking that legislative directive and implementing it, we did through the Phase 1 order, February 11th of 2021. And the commission issued an order, I voted for it. In this Phase 1 order, it, among other things, really looked at a distinction between Phase 1 and Phase 2 projects and provided guidance specifically on the process for cost recovery of Phase 1 projects. There are other things it did, but primarily this Phase 1 order was a significant policy implementation guidance document. We provided that guidance on a process for receiving cost recovery for the implementation of Phase 1 local T&D projects that the utilities say can support the state's achievements of CLCPA targets. I underscore that the utilities say. We adopted the utilities definition, which indicated that Phase 1 projects are those that address traditional reliability, safety, and compliance purposes. And it also happens to simultaneously, they believe, support renewable generation needs and CLCPA targets. So essentially, in other words, without modifying anything about their projects, progress towards the state goals can be met through this project development. Now, the Joint Utilities report that was the basis for our commission order in this proceeding explained that Phase 1 projects are those that would be completed under traditional T&D planning processes as they impact the utility's obligation to provide safe, reliable, and cost-effective service. As far as the utilities were concerned, and as far as our order adopting that was concerned, there was nothing new, unique, or special about these projects in the context of their overall capital budgets and plans. We envisioned and contemplated perhaps an acceleration of plans where it made sense. We looked to that the best way was to do it in a rate case, but we understood that we might need to accelerate if it made sense. And essentially where the utilities rate case filing was quite a ways away. Now, after we did Phase 1, we saw National Grid submit a Phase 1 petition, and that was before us. I voted no for it on that. But in that, my rationale for voting no was specific on a sort of case-by-case basis to that particular petition. So because I voted no on that doesn't mean I'm voting no on the next petition that comes before. And I looked at that, and what concerned me was that we had just recently adopted the joint proposal that had been done through National Grid rate case. And I was concerned that by now, all of a sudden now, very shortly after deciding phase one, that in a sense, we were modifying the joint proposal outside of the rate case context. And my concern went really sort of at the heart of why the phase one order preferred it being done in a rate case, understanding that we may have to accelerate. So we, in that case, by doing it the way we were doing and deciding National Grid's phase one and approving them, allows the project, and this is what I stated at session last time, to point the company's next rate filing. Literally what happens is that we are looking at a higher base rate coming in. That concerned me. That concerned me that it's essentially rolling into the base rate in the next rate case, subject to prudency review. And from my perspective, it also, the bigger concern I had, and that I stated, was that the projects, how the projects impact the capital project plans, had just been approved in the joint proposal. And had these projects been considered during that 12 months that the rate case was under consideration by the active parties, and by the ALJ, and then came before us, the priorities for those projects included in the joint proposal may have been different and have resulted in some projects not being pursued at that time. And so I had real concerns about how rigorous our accounting for National Grid's projects will be kept separate from the accounting for the rate case projects, and truly, if not done right, can have detrimental results on the ratepayers. And as an example, I stated that the rate case requires a reconciliation and repayment to customers of any unspent capital project funds over the 3 years of the rate plan. And so I wasn't sure how the commission would be able to determine whether expenses for the phase one projects might be used to ensure that the company hits a 3-year expenditure target, and that would deprive customers what otherwise could have been an IOU. So that due diligence review or lack thereof concerned me, and so I voted no. Now we have before us this phase one petition. And I'm mindful of that there is some contrast and difference between the National Grid phase one petition and here. That filing by National Grid was made at the end of a rate proceeding over projects that hadn't been part of the rate filing. If the commission had waited, no action would have been taken on those proposals in phase one for many years, which gets back to the phase one order. In a sense, even though I voted no, it's harder for me to vote yes here than it was there. Why? Because at least that petition fit within the logic of the February 2021 order scheme and made logical sense in that framework, because it was focused on perhaps needing to accelerate if we're having to wait so long for a rate case. Here, the time between NYSEG's phase one petition and its rate case filing that includes all these projects under consideration today was only 5 months. Not even half a year. This isn't just my opinion. The draft order that's before us talks about the timing of these filings and says that that this is a parallel process, a circumstance we did not envision in the phase one order. We did not envision it, and I hearken to Bet that if we had envisioned it, we would have said that they were not allowed to proceed separately if you were going to only a short few months later file a rate case filing. It should be decided in that. And it's currently in the middle of settlement discussions. We as commissioners have no idea the discussions around what's happening in the settlement discussions, nor should we. However, we are independently weighing in implicitly on the very thing that should be part of that rate case. That is truly troubling to me.
Commissioner, if I could just jump in really briefly to put some context around the genesis of the phase one order and the problems that you're alluding to. That is the proximity or lack of proximity to the rate case. And that is that at the time of the phase one order in February of 2021, no utilities rates included phase one projects, because the idea of a phase one project did not exist in the preceding years when the utilities presented their capital programs to this commission. So the intent of the commission creating the mechanism, and the commission weighed some of the same considerations you're talking about now in that phase one order. The intent of that mechanism was to recognize, one, utilities do not have funding for these projects in their current rate plans, and two, CLCPA deadlines require action outside of the rate cycle. So if there were another mechanism to achieve that objective, I think we looked, and staff concluded and recommended, and this commission adopted both the concept of the phase one and the circumstances under which a utility would be permitted to bring phase one projects forward after February of 2021. So I just want to remind the commission that this category did not exist prior to February, and so no one's rates included phase one projects at that time.
Absolutely, 100% understand. The irony of it all, though, is that the phase one order and my no vote in National Grid and now here is actually aligned. It's okay to say, put forward petitions perhaps that you think should be for phase one. We don't have to then say, you put forward a petition for phase one, so we've got to approve at least some of it. No, we can say, what is the appropriate mechanism for deciding these projects? When they put forward the phase one petition in December of 2021, a few short months later, they brought forward the rate case and put the same petitions in there. Now, do I fault the company for doing that? Absolutely not. They've had previous issues where we've told them, put the AMI stuff in a rate case, take it out of the rate case, put it back in a rate case, and it's this dance, right? But it's our obligation to determine what's the right bucket. We have this phase one order. We're looking at it, and we're also saying it's most appropriate, to the extent we can, to decide these things in the rate case. If there are things that we need to accelerate because we can't do it in the rate case, then we should have the phase one petition and then look at that. There's nothing. This is a misnomer that somehow by us waiting a few short months now for the rate case, that somehow that is going to be a risk factor that's going to put everything in chaos, and we have to decide these phase ones. And I'm cognizant of the fact that there is already an ongoing settlement discussion over the rate case. So this action today would only apply for the next 4.5 months, even if we take advantage of the extension of the suspension period that we did last month in the rate case. The rate year starts May 1st because of the inclusion of our make whole provision. So waiting 4 or 5 months to make a decision in the context of the entirety of the proposed capital budget for the next 1 or more rate years, that's the appropriate thing to do, rather than baking in now some portion of these proposed expenses. It doesn't make sense. It's illogical. And to the extent that the draft says that we're not prejudging the rate case with regard to these projects, if you vote yes, you are prejudging, even if you don't mean it, because I don't see how the justification today for approving them here is subject to change in the next few months, where testimony has been fully filed and the parties are in settlement negotiations. And if these projects are somehow left out of that settlement, then that's even more of a reason that we should not approve this today, regardless of the size of those costs relative to the company's entire proposed capital budget. After today's action, if we approve this, why would any party even try to challenge the projects we just approved here, even if we can theoretically revoke further approval 5 or 6 months from now? It would make no sense. The certainty that we're giving is not a certainty. It actually messes up the certainty in the discussions that are already going on. And it messes up the certainty in the very things that I had concern with, going back to the National Grid Phase 1, where I said, if we do this outside of the rate case, there's confusion on how to look at it, how to account for it, how to keep it separate. But also, we're just pushing it almost to the head to say, here you go, on a silver platter, this is what we believe. And so we must at least take ownership of the fact that we are then putting that into the rate discussions and rate settlement in a way that may actually harm the ongoing settlement negotiations. Now, to the extent that we're being advised to act now because the company may have paused activity on developing these projects, given the definition of a phase 1 project, let me remind everyone, it's that it's necessary for traditional reliability and safety. If the company is pausing it, I have a real problem with that action in that it seems to have been done solely to wait and see what decision is made here and how much pre-new rate year money we allow them to spend, that they will have a practical guarantee of future cost recovery. If these projects are really needed now for reliability and safety, so much so that the company has started activity on developing these projects and now are pausing it, well, I question that and why the activity would pause if the result is then to push off reliability and safety improvements. We should not allow that. Finally, I want to point out one other thing in the draft order on page 10 and 11. The draft order language says, we emphasize that nothing in this order is intended to prejudge the outcome of any issue raised in the 2022 rate case, including the prudence of any of the company's proposed capital investments. Let me underscore that, including the prudence of any of the company's proposed capital investments. Now, I already spoke about why I think it is prejudging if we on the outcome of the projects. However, what struck me is the language, including the prudence of any of the company's proposed capital investments. Why is this concerning to me? For prudence, of course it doesn't prejudge issues in the rate case. To be clear, no approval of utility forward-looking capital budgets in rate cases ever forecloses a later prudence review. Commission approval can obviously be evidence of why a company undertook a project, but the prudence of any actual work done and expenses incurred can only be determined after those actions have taken place. We look back at what was done, and although judged in the context of the action, of the time those actions were taken, it cannot be prejudged to be prudent. So I am concerned that this order language gives a mistaken impression of the understanding of how prudence review actually works. And we need to make that clear, because we cannot have that be mistaken. It's too important on our prudence review. So with all of that, I'm going to be voting no. However, I want to be clear, I do not believe reliability is at risk. I believe strongly that it's actually more prudent for us and more appropriate for us to do it within the rate case context. And I think that it does not, the delay is not something that we should think this is a horrible thing, it's going to delay. I don't buy that. And in fact, we have had other cases where utilities have told us it's going to take X amount of time, and we say, really, let's get under the hood and see how much time is this going to take. So I don't see this as justification for our phase one, which has the two prongs, reliability and CLCPA deadlines. I think if we do this through the rate case, we're in good standing. There's nothing from a fiduciary responsibility that delay that causes any harm here. And in fact, we would be doing, I think, the appropriate thing in setting the standard of what we determine in the rate case. So with that, I'm going to be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could, Chair, respond just to one thing that the Commissioner alluded to, and that is the how much time do we have left to the 2030 deadlines? And what I want to say about that is that the information we have in the record tells us that we can't wait for the end of April or the end of May for the resolution of the rate case. The information that we have in the record tells us that further delay puts this group of projects, puts the schedule for these projects at risk. And given that that is the information that we have in the record, staff's recommendation boils down to prioritizing these projects among the many, many reliability-based projects that are part of that rate case, because the only information we have tells us that we are in those exigent circumstances that were contemplated in the phase one order, where further delay, waiting through the end of the rate case, jeopardizes progress on this specific group and knocks them off the railroad for being in service in time to meet this commission's statutory obligations to develop infrastructure to meet CLCPA. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Ms. Picassaro.
I have to respond to, and the reality is, Chair, that I didn't ask a question. I stated my position. And I understand that you are helping to clarify. No, the commission deliberation is important. And for me, I'm very clear on what's in the record and what's not in the record. I believe strongly that what's in the record saying there may be a delay is actually not accurate. One, we didn't get under the hood. We didn't ask them to look at that more carefully. We did no deep analysis on that. Everything else that I said, factually and legally, is correct. I'm very, very, very comfortable with looking at this from where I sit and saying the appropriate venue here is the rate case, and it's not putting at jeopardy. We're not hearing it's putting at jeopardy reliability, and we're not hearing that it's putting at jeopardy meeting our obligations, and the make-whole provisions are already there. So waiting a few months to decide the rate case where there's already ongoing settlement discussions does not, by my voting no, put anything at risk. And in fact, we can be very much mindful of the fact that we want to help ensure that we're doing the right thing, both from a fiduciary responsibility, from reliability responsibility, and from making sure that projects get done. Doing this today doesn't speed up or accelerate anything. In fact, it may cause more difficulties as we look to what this means in the rate case. And so for that, I think the appropriate venue is the rate case. I'm still going to be voting no, but thank you.
Thank you for the healthy discussion. We'll move on to Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm satisfied that NYSEG has made a solid case to continue these development expenditures that are essential to keeping important projects on a path forward, meet CLCPA deadlines. I'll be voting yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
I do not have any questions. I'll be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liz, if the $1.2 billion, a little less than that, is ultimately ruled prudent in the rate case, what does that do to NYSEG's revenue requirement?
I can attempt an answer to that question. I think if we have to get into details, I may call on a colleague. First thing to mention is that these or any capital transmission project expenses don't go into rates until the facilities are in service. So the estimated 1.2 billion cost of this set of projects would not hit customer bills until sometime, let's say, sometime after 2030. So several years down the road. And I think we have attempted to calculate, based on what we know about NYSEG's overall capital expenditures, what fraction this 1.2 billion might represent at that stage. And I believe we calculated.
So yeah, we calculated the impact to be about 16% based on what would be rate year one of the current rate case.
So 16%.
16%. That's correct.
In an environment where we've been keeping costs down to the 2% range. So now we're looking forward, should these be ruled prudent, we are building in a potential double-digit bill increase. Is that fair to say?
It's a little hard to answer not having the full context of what might come out of this next rate case, but we are certainly adding to the upward pressure.
Thank you. Also, through the course of discussion and briefing, and just the historic record, this company has underinvested in transmission for decades. Decades. For a whole variety of reasons. And this commission has allowed it to happen largely to moderate rates for a variety of reasons going forward. But the time has come. Some of these, and I'm an old guy, and some of these facilities we're talking about are way older than me. Way past their design life. They need to be replaced. And by linking them to the CLCPA goals, we sort of get, I don't want to use the phrase, the get out of jail free card for the company, but it certainly sounds a little bit like that because, God, we know we've had to spend this money for decades. We haven't done it. Now we're going to do it. But if we do it now, we get some headroom to meet our CLCPA goals, so a large potential double-digit bill increase is okay. So again, I'm very concerned about that. Also, the timing. In all due respect, the analysis we have, I don't think 4 or 5 months makes a big difference. I really don't. Particularly in a period of supply chain inadequacies. We don't even know what the supply chain is right now in terms of building large transmission facilities in the near and medium term. Have no idea. We don't know that if this $1.2 billion that we may ultimately approve in the rate case will buy us the same number of projects they say they're going to. I believe that will be insufficient to cover the cost of the projects enumerated in this order. I think the issue will also affect these same supply chain issues and other issues will also affect those companies and entities wanting to bid into Tier 1. We're already seeing delays in Tier 1 constructions. We've seen projects withdrawn, and we are really in an unprecedented times in terms of what utility capital expenses mean and how much they really cost and how much dollar we get, how much capital investment we get for every dollar we spend. We don't know that right now. So I think the appropriate place for this will be in the rate case, which, as Commissioner pointed out in some degree of eloquence, is going on now. And I don't believe that a delay of 4 months, 5 months will slow down our CLCPA goals. And, but as I stated earlier in another case, transparency. Let's tell everybody how much this is going to cost way in advance of before we put our hand in their pocket. So I think I will be voting no, not because I don't believe these projects are necessary, not because I don't believe that they will provide CLCPA headroom. I just think the appropriate venue for this vote will be in several months when we do the entire NYSEG rate case. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Excuse me, can I just make a clarification on the 16%? I just wanted to say that those in-service dates are happening kind of in stages, not all in 2030. So the 16% is if you kind of would lump it in all at once. However, that would really happen over a multi-year period beginning in 2027 and going through 2031.
Thank you, Marion. I understand that, but so much of what this commission has done, particularly in regard to CLCPA compliance, is obligating ratepayers many years from now to pay the bill. Just because we don't feel the pain today doesn't mean it's not coming. So again, this is just one aspect of many in both not only the NYSEG service territory but statewide that we will see growing revenue requirements and bigger bills going forward. The question of whether it's appropriate or not, that's for another venue. But again, this is just wanting to get on the record that we may be incurring costs to you ratepayers that they don't feel for many years.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to Commissioner Valesky. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liz, I want to try to just get a little better understanding of of the timeline involved here, so if we could. So some of these will be questions, some will be comments, sort of as we go along, I guess. So the original petition was filed almost a year ago to the day, correct? December 23rd.
That's correct. It was last December.
Okay.
Yep.
So because we have not taken any action yet, I suppose we're about to, but because we haven't taken any action yet, the company hasn't been able to do anything with what they proposed a year ago, right? They've been waiting for action from us.
They've been waiting for action from us, and they have, they reasonably or unreasonably expected the commission might have acted on the petition by sometime last spring.
Okay. I'm glad you said that because that's where I kind of wanted to follow up with you. So my question has nothing to do with a lack of appreciation of the work on your part, Mary Ann's part, and your entire team. But it almost seems to me, because I share some of the comments that we've already heard about the timeliness of this in juxtaposition to the upcoming rate case, or a joint proposal that we'll, I assume, be seeing relatively soon. Couldn't the argument be made that, again, I know a lot of work was involved to bring it to us, but shouldn't we have, to your point about the concern over the 2030 goals, shouldn't we have had this already, perhaps a few months ago or even longer, if in fact the concern is so overwhelming that and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but if we're somehow we're in danger of coming off the tracks of meeting those goals, shouldn't we have already considered this by now?
Well, at the time NYSEG filed the petition a year ago, the company was projecting in-service dates for the subgroup of projects. Forgive me, Jerry. I think 25 to 20, 24 to 27. They hadn't 28. So as of last December, they thought they had some wiggle room and that they could get these projects in service by the 2028 timeframe. We did over the last several months, we have talked with the company about its own estimate of the timelines, and they explained to us that, in part due to the uncertainty, those projects have now slipped, so that the current information that we have is that the same group of projects is now bumping up against the 2030 deadline. But if I'm understanding your question, the company did not start from a position of our hair is on fire, we have to do this now because we're at the end of our rope.
Okay. So going forward with these projects, so assume that the order is approved. So over the next 4.5 months, $99 million, roughly $25 million a month, roughly, the rough math. So what is the development that will occur over the next 4.5 months for roughly $25 million a month? And as you answer that, if you could answer to the necessity of whatever that might be happening over the next 4.5 months, as opposed to beginning May 1st.
Right.
They've basically probably spent already 60 million of that, so it's not future going 25 million a month.
Well, then that's confusing. That's doubly confusing me, because if we haven't considered a petition yet, how could they have spent anything?
Out of the kindness of their heart, they started these projects. Well, these projects have been on the books for a long time now, so they've been working on them, developing them, and so on.
Don't forget, these projects, as Jerry says, have been on the company's books under the radar of what are our future reliability and asset management obligations. So the company has been looking across its portfolio, all of its facilities, and conducting studies to see, where the issues are, where the issues are coming up. So the company, like I think all the utilities, they are constantly spending money, looking forward, planning solutions, planning for new, for new work, for new capital investment. So they've been spending money. That's why this is a request to continue spending money, not to start spending, but to continue. But
the money, and I appreciate my colleagues' patience with my questions, the money that they have spent was not included in their previous rate case?
I think,
No,
not specifically spelled out in the previous rate case.
Okay.
no, because those projects were not in the rate case. So it's just development costs that they do on the side, and eventually they hope to capitalize them. But
And so to fast forward to today, they're saying that they're no longer going to continue to spend upwards of the $60 million that they've already spent unless and until we approve this order.
part of the problem is now they're into the potential procurement long-term contract mode, and they don't want to get involved in long-term contracts if there's no approval at this time. So they'll spend dollars maybe to prepare Article sevens and that type of thing, but they don't want to go ahead with major.
So can I, if I could come back to the, I know you had started to answer the question. So the $98.8 million between now and May 1st, we'll just say May 1st, how will that be spent in terms of what is development, spending on the development of these projects? What does that actually mean?
I will defer to Jerry, who's had, who's looked more specifically, but it's continuing engineering, it's preparing Article 7 applications, which, if you think about it, requires a lot of environmental studies, have to be prepared in advance, working engineering, procurement, environmental work. I think there's construction, planning for construction, acquiring resources. I mean, there's an infinite number of things that go into developing a project, and I will tell you from personal experience that developing an energy project costs a lot of money. And there are just a million things that have to be done before you can put shovels in the ground. So unless Jerry, you have something more specific than that,
I mean, there's right-of-way procurement involved,
yeah.
site preparation,
leases with local landowners, finding the right number of trucks to do your snow plowing in case you need snow plowing. I mean, there's just a huge amount of things that you have to do to get ready to build a project. That said, I think you reminded me of something, but now I've forgotten. Sorry.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and because I think that's important for us to know and for those who are listening to know. I guess I think that's it for my questions. Really more of a rhetorical question. I can't help but wonder whether or not, again, back to the timeline that we've been traveling, that started on December 23rd, 2021, have we in fact already passed the time at which, and by time I mean its proximity to the upcoming rate case, have we already passed that time in which this order will in fact be helpful? Again, that's not intended to be a question for which I'm seeking an answer. I guess the answer is only time will tell. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
So you're not looking for a response to that question?
Sure. If you feel like you'd share one, sure.
In a way, one can say that about all things. Time will tell, right? But we need to get a little more granular than the philosophical. This commission has a statutory obligation to identify the upgrades that are needed to meet CLCPA, and I think that, that statutory mandate has the same weight as the other obligations that sit on you for overseeing the system, including your obligation to look out for reliability. So you have to factor, all of those things into your decision making. We at the staff level are trying to put you, the commission, in a position to, at the end of the day, succeed in meeting a CLCPA obligation in a way that is cost effective and reliable.
Well, I appreciate that. And I certainly appreciate, again, the effort that you and your staff took to take these original 23 projects and divide them into component projects and really sort of drill down as to the ones that you and your collective expertise feel are necessary for our consideration. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair, I'd like to weigh in here since a lot of this discussion right now.
And I'm going to have to stop you because I would like to afford the other commissioners opportunities to speak.
And then you'll come back to me?
We'll go to a vote. We've had our chance to go through, we've discussed. I want to make sure that they have an opportunity.
So we can't have commission deliberation on fleshing it out? Staff can correct the record, but we can't flesh it out?
Staff been providing information. If you have another question, that's in addition to what's been asked before.
Yes, I have another question then.
Okay.
Thank
you. Go
you.
ahead, ask.
Excuse me, Chair, is this the protocol that we typically follow, though? I mean, isn't it Commissioner Majori's turn?
It is Commissioner Majori's.
People are entitled to vote wherever they want to vote, but I don't understand why we're having these extended communications if it's Commissioner Majori's.
I'll save my question after Commissioner Majori goes.
Back and forth again.
I think commission deliberation is appropriate.
Well, can we take a moment here, please, to...
That you're not supporting. I just think that this whole thing is it's too much.
Let's take a moment here. We're going to go to Commissioner Majori. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I thought it was concise and answered many of the questions I had coming into this. In the abstract, I would prefer this type of thing to be part of the case.
I'm sorry,
Why-
Commissioner Majori, the court reporter can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me better, any better now? No?
Can you hear him?
Yeah, I think the other microphone provides better sound.
Anything?
No,
No?
no, the microphone Commissioner Edwards was using was working better.
Okay. I now have 4 microphones. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, if you can keep your voice up and stay close to the mic, I think we'll work our way through.
All right. Okay, I'll be. I will limit my comments to this. I think you answered several of my questions coming into this. You explained why we're doing this outside of a rate case. I don't see anything in the record that challenges your assessment of that. There was a concern in the record about limiting the authorization in this order only to those projects that are necessary at this time, which is what this order does. So based on what's in the record and based on your explanation, I'm intending to vote yes. So thank you very much.
He's voting yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now with that, we'll bring this item to a vote. I'm sorry, what was that, Commissioner Brewer? No, we are going to move forward with the voting. Thank you. So my vote is in favor of the recommendation to approve NYSEG's request to develop certain Phase 1 local transmission projects with modifications as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I'll be explaining my vote as a no. It is for me very important that I feel that my and all of our commission voices are heard. This traditionally, since I've been on the commission just about 2023 will be my 10 years, I really very much appreciate that it is not the way it has always been, which is that we are operating in silo and that there's due deliberation that's happening in public and perhaps also making us think about whether we're rightly voting, whether we're thinking through it, and that questions that come up or thoughts that come up during the commission session are able to be discussed and deliberated. And just because one person has already spoken, there may afterwards be another question or a thought that comes up or some due deliberation to go back and forth. I'm in the uncomfortable position of being silenced in trying to ensure that my rationale for why I'm voting no is a sound one. Staff has felt empowered to correct, in air quotes, the record on things that have come up that I have said or that another commissioner has said. And then another commissioner asks questions and then staff is engaged in explaining it on a lot of the issues that I specifically am focused on. So it's important for me to feel that it is a commission deliberative process. Staff is there to answer questions and to help shed light on things, but it's for us as a commission, as a body, to make sure that we are collaboratively discussing. In fact, something that I think we've all tried to strive for, and it's actually, I think, refreshing to go into a session with people open to listening to what others are saying, and for staff to feel comfortable in sharing their thoughts. I think it's really good. It's not good for a commissioner to feel silenced, especially when she sticks out like a sore thumb in how she thinks and sees it differently. And it's actually very demoralizing to me to not have that opportunity to shed some light on or some more information that I think is important. It is really important for us to make sure that we are moving forward together in a way that brings us together as a team, even if we have diversity of substantive thought. Really important. I can't feel comfortable if we're isolating people's communication in that way. The real issue is, does this put things at harm? The company originally said it would be done in X date.
Commissioner Berman, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to stop you there. We're voting on the item. I'm happy to provide you additional time, but we've done our deliberations and we're at the voting stage of the proceeding.
I vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Howard?
No.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori? Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. We'll now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on the consent agenda? And I'll reiterate, items specific to the consent agenda, beginning with Commissioner Berman.
Item 263, I'm a no, consistent with my past voting record. Item 371, I want to take a moment. This is on the matter of the reliability rules of the New York State Reliability Council and the criteria of the Northeast Power Coordinating Council. I want to give a big kudos to our staff who works tirelessly on the reliability issues. And I want to give a big shout out of kudos to those who are involved in the reliability rules in the New York State Reliability Council and the New York ISO and all stakeholders who are dedicated to this issue. It may seem like a sleeper of an issue, but these reliability rules and our engagement and drilling down on this is super important. And I can't underscore enough my admiration for those who are working on these issues. So thank you.
Forgive me. Commissioner Alisi?
I'll be voting yes on the entire agenda.
Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, no comments. I'll be supporting the consent agenda.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes, I'll be supporting the consent agenda except for one item, item 370, that's consistent with my prior votes on the subject.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
Commissioner Majori?
I will be supporting the consent agenda, yes on all items on the consent agenda.
Thank you. So my vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman?
I'm in favor of all items except 263. I'm a no vote. Thank you.
And Commissioner Alisi?
Yes on all items.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes on all items.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes on all items except item 370, where I am a no.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes on all items.
Okay. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Secretary Phillips, is there anything further to come before us today?
Nothing further except that I just want to wish everyone happy holiday season and a happy new year.
Thank you. And before we adjourn, I want to acknowledge and celebrate the service of a DPS employee who has served the agency and the people of New York in a way that few others have. I'd like to recognize Greg Sayre, former commissioner, current LNG. Thank you. Please stand up. Sorry to embarrass you, Greg, but I know you'll be retiring, and we wanted to properly acknowledge all the good work and help you've provided us as an agency, and again, the state of New York. So thank you for your service. All right, great. Thank you. All right, and with that, I will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you all.